The Democrat Party, the globalist party, the totalitarian party, whatever you want to call them, they censured her for going to the White House, speaking to the president, portraying him in a positive light, and speaking about hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax that saved her life. They have since censured her.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Before we begin this interview with our mutual friend and truth teller Dave Janda, just a quick word from this interview's sponsor. So the recent breakout of the coronavirus, whether manufactured or not, is reminding all of us how easily things can turn from bad to worse. The sad part is 99% of Americans are unprepared for a catastrophic event. And one of the best investments you can have for protection when the lights go out is a solar power bank. And why not purchase one of the best solar banks on the market? The backup solar bank. The good news is you'll never waste money on batteries again because the backup power bank is solar powered. With dual USB ports, you can charge up to 2 devices at once, and you can charge your phone anywhere. This device is an all-in-one lifesaver. Device features include solar powered recharging, dual USB ports, 8,000 mAh battery capacity, LED lamp illumination, USB cable, and detachable compass. The backup solar bank is the perfect device to assist you and your family when the lights go out. But limited supplies last, and it's your last chance to get yours at a discount before they sell out. Take advantage now and give you and your family the gift of power anywhere in the world. So visit backupsolarbank.com and use coupon code SGT20 to save 20% off your order. I'll leave the link below this interview. Thanks so much for tuning in, friends. It's wonderful to have you back. I'm finally out of Twitter jail. I've never been in Twitter jail, but it happened yesterday. 12 hours for daring to suggest that we open businesses from coast to coast and that states don't have the legal authority to bankrupt you by forcing you to keep your small business closed. Twitter didn't like that one bit, and after the 12 hours was up, they said you can have your account back if you delete that tweet. So another slap on the hand by Big Brother, right, Dave Janda? How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Sean, but you're right. We are getting whacked by Big Brother on a minute-by-minute basis. It's not getting any easier or better.
No, it's not. Dr. Dave Janda joins us, guys. You know his websites, davejanda.com and operationfreedom.com, broadcasting there from the heart of tyranny in Michigan, where Governor Gretchen Whitmer is just about as bad as Justin Trudeau, the hand of the Queen, who just banned guns in Canada. Do you want to give us an update about the state of life and freedom in Michigan?
Yeah, first of all, I'm coming to you audio only, as you know, Sean, because I recently underwent some emergency surgery for a torn and detached retina. And for those, just a bit of education to folks, if you start seeing a lot of floaters or a lot of debris coming down in front of your eye or a curtain or lightning, you need to get that checked out right away. And that's what happened to me on April 3rd. And here's where it takes a bit of a turn because of the state of where we are in our state of Michigan. I've described our state as the largest POW encampment in North America. And you probably remember the show Hogan's Heroes, Sean. The incompetent overseer of Stalag 13 was Colonel Klink. I have dubbed Gretchen Whitmer the Colonel Klink Gretchen Whitmer because of her incompetence as overseeing the state, and in particular the Stalag that she's created. The reason why I bring this up is when this happened to me on April 3rd, I recognized the symptoms because I had a detached retina in the other eye a couple years ago. I immediately called my ophthalmologic surgeon. The problem is that all doctors' offices were closed here in Michigan because of Colonel Klink Gretchen Whitmer. She had closed all outpatient surgery facilities and doctors' offices in the state as of March 23rd. I called my ophthalmologic surgeon, got through to the answering service. He called me back and said, look, this is an absolute emergency because by waiting on this, you're going to go blind in that eye. He actually ended up coming into his office, opening it up, examined me, and confirmed the diagnosis, and then looked at me with my one working eye and said, so the problem is, Dave, I can't operate on you because all of our operating room facilities are closed by the governor. So the alternative is to send you over to the University of Michigan which is a fine center. But the problem is Southeast Michigan is a viral hotspot, which it was at the time. We became a viral hotspot on March 24th. And that was actually because of the incompetence of Whitmer as well, Sean, because what nobody wants to talk about is that when you look at this virus, you have to look 2 weeks before of what was happening in a state or a community if they became a hotspot. And what was happening 2 weeks before March 24th, when we became a hotspot, is she allowed the Michigan primary to occur. She allowed it to occur because she knew if she could get Biden across the finish line, which was the, if you will, dead-end street for Bernie Sanders, that she would start to be considered for the number 2 slot. She not only allowed the primary to happen on March 10th, she was campaigning in Detroit, in Dearborn, in Grosse Pointe on March 6, 7, 8, and 9. Guess what, Sean? When the surge hit here for the hotspot of the virus, it hit in Detroit, Dearborn, and Grosse Pointe the hardest on the 24th. And in fact, the reason why we became a hotspot is because she allowed that primary to happen. Now listen, the polls closed at 8 p.m. on March 10th. And guess what, Sean? 2 hours after the polls closed, she declared a state of emergency because of the virus. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so sick. So turns out that my surgeon looks at me and says, yeah, we're in a viral hotspot. The only place I can send you is the University of Michigan, which was fine because they're a great facility. But it is one of the centers for the viral hotspot. So my choices were to go blind because I couldn't have my surgeon that I've had in the past, or go blind because I didn't want to expose myself to what might be happening and occurring in the emergency room at the center that could handle my eye surgery, or just, take my chances and go for it. Well, I took my chances and go for it because being blind in one eye was not a good alternative. I ended up going to the hospital at University of Michigan. They took very good care of me, but to give you a bird's eye, one eye view of what I saw, many people at the time, Sean, were saying, the virus is a complete hoax. It doesn't exist. Every hospital is empty. And granted, Sean, many hospitals across the country were empty. Okay. And that's because the virus had not hit in the vast majority of our country, which is great. But in the areas where it did hit, it was very severe and very significant. And what I watched with one eye and experienced was it was a system that was not overrun. People were not being removed from ventilators. It was busy. And I knew this ahead of time because of my friends that I have worked with for over 30 years in the front line of healthcare delivery who are still working were telling me this. But what we found was that the intensive care units were very busy, and they were very busy with people that appeared to be afflicted with the coronavirus. And when they got hit hard. So had the surgery, was discharged. And when you have a surgery like this, Sean, the first 5 days, you have to be flat, face down 50 minutes out of every hour, right? Now, that's pretty miserable. But when they do your surgery with this retina, it's kind of like wallpaper peeling away from the wall. After they put the wallpaper back on the wall, they put this gas bubble in your eye to hold the repair. Well, you can't see anything for about a month because it's a big gas bubble. And let me tell you something, it's been quite trying, which is why I still can't do a video because of lights, because it reflects on the bubble, which is kind of like a disco ball in your eye. So it would have been a bad look.
Yeah, that sounds like hell. Well, they saved your eye though, right? Bottom line?
Right. So the vision's coming back. Obviously, I have a long way to go on that, but the vision's coming back and we're doing fine. And I will be forever grateful for the doctors and the nurses and the anesthesiologists that were still in the hospital tending to people that needed emergency treatment. But now it was just announced today that the University of Michigan is laying off 1,400 people because, their census is significantly down as it relates to coronavirus patients, But because our totalitarian governor, who I've also dubbed Typhoid Whitmer or Corona Gretchen or whatever, Commandant Klink Whitmer, whatever you want to call her, she still hasn't opened up medical facilities.
Well, it
It's a
begs the
huge
question,
problem.
how many people are dying or will die because they can't get access to treatment? I sound like a broken record, right? But this is absolute insanity that a tyrant like her is still in office and allowed to unconstitutionally bankrupt small businesses and prevent sick people from getting care unless they have coronavirus, evidently. So gauge the temperature for us in Michigan. I saw some video of armed militia showing up at the state capitol. I mean, I think they want to wring this woman's neck. She's being sued. How do we solve this issue?
Well, here's the thing. What she's out there saying now is, well, people should not protest. Under any circumstances, people should not protest. Well, people should protest. They should do it peacefully, right? They should do it responsibly. Now, here's the thing, Sean. There have been several large protests. One on April 15th, and she said at that protest, people, I think 10,000 cars came to the state capitol. She actually had the state police shutting off the highway entrances into the state capitol. They were still finding their way around it. 10,000 cars surrounding, beeping their horns around the state capitol and the like. And she said, because these people did this, this is going to make the outbreak far worse. Well, before we just did this interview, Sean, with my one working eye, I got on the state statistics. So remember, 2 weeks, right? So that was on April 15th, which means April 29th, we should have seen an enormous surge in cases. It didn't happen, Sean. It didn't happen. People are very irate. So then this past week, there was another protest, and there were some people that showed up from the militia, and you can actually open carry in the Capitol buildings in, I believe, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So there were some people there open carrying, but there were thousands of people there, and everybody was peaceful. There was nothing. But Whitmer came out and she said, oh, the major hospital in Lansing, the capital, Sparrow Hospital, the entrances were blocked. And, well, in fact, I checked. There were no citations issued by the police. And in fact, a spokesperson for Sparrow Hospital said, no, all the entrances were open. We didn't have any problems. But where we stand in the state of Michigan is truly a POW enslavement camp. Let me give you another indication of the totalitarian nature. I agree with you, Sean. There are probably hundreds of thousands of Americans that are not going to hospitals for treatment because they've been, if you will, petrified that if they go to a hospital, they're going to get coronavirus. And there are and we don't really know the numbers as far as the number of deaths.
Well, they're inflating the numbers, man. That's the problem, and everybody paying attention knows it. They're inflating the numbers. You know that.
They are.
There's that Dr. Whistleblower who's a senator in Minnesota who said, yeah, the Department of Health is telling them to label all deaths COVID-19 if there's any possibility even that the death was attributed to that, even if the person actually died from pneumonia, even if the person was very sick prior to this entire outbreak. They die in the hospital now, they're elderly, you put COVID-19 on the death certificate. Meanwhile, we have a lobbyist for Gilead in the Oval Office. I posted this the other day. Listen to this. This guy's got some nerve.
Although a 31% improvement doesn't seem like a knockout 100%, it is a very important proof of concept. Because what it is proven is that a drug can block this virus. And I'll give you an example in a moment of why we think, looking forward, this is very optimistic. The mortality rate trended towards being better in the sense of less deaths in the remdesivir group. 8% versus 11% in the placebo group.
Now listen to this. Not statistically significant, right? Listen to this.
It has not yet reached statistical significance, but the data needs to be further analyzed. The reason why we're making the announcement now.
Now here's the part where he portrays himself as a hero, right? He's really trying to help people with Gilead's remdesivir. He never will mention hydroxychloroquine.
Is something that I believe people don't fully appreciate. Whenever you have clear-cut evidence that a drug works, you have an ethical obligation to immediately let the people who are in the placebo group know so that they could have access. And all of the other trials that are taking place now have a new standard of care.
What a hero. Meanwhile, Birx, the woman who's devoted half her home to housing hideous scarves, nods in the background. So my question is, at what point is the president going to toss these two out on their asses? Because he's so conflicted with Gates, I can play a soundbite about that in a second, that it's beyond belief. Meanwhile, he's pushing remdesivir, and it's not even statistically significant.
So a couple things. Fauci, I met him a couple times 25 years ago. Seemed like a nice enough guy. He was doing a lot of work at the center. At that point, I believe he was the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. But he was a well-known researcher and respected. This was 25 years ago. And his main focus has been on AIDS. Several of my contacts, very close friends that I've known for over 30 years, involved in infectious disease, I know Fauci, have worked with him, also Birx. My contacts have said, these folks, these two are good scientists, but I have some significant issues. The first issue I had with Fauci is when the top, I believe the top infectious disease clinician in the world, Dr. Dieter Renaud from Marseille, France, started speaking about hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin. He started publishing studies in mid-March. First series was a series of 26 patients, then 80 patients. His most recent series was 1,061 patients. When it first came out and when President Trump started speaking about it, Fauci was out there, just dismissed it as a pure, and this is how academics are. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be generalized, but I'm telling you, academics in medicine, it's their way or no way. It's their opinion. No other opinions matter. And they're very dismissive of any other data or facts that come in front of them. And that's exactly the way Fauci acted.
Well, and it's worse. It's worse too. It's worse because I'm going to share a soundbite. I'm going to share a soundbite for you here in a second that'll make your toes curl.
That was very concerning, Sean, about how he dismissed it, because Renaud, who is the best clinician when it comes to infectious disease issues, very straight down the middle, not compromised financially. And as you mentioned, Fauci has ties. He has ties with big pharmaceuticals, big vaccines, and this is why a month ago I funneled information in, over a month ago, to the White House saying, look, any person beyond an MD, every person on the coronavirus task force needs to file disclosure statements and sign off and say they will have no financial interest in a test, in a vaccine, or any medication related to coronavirus or anything associated with this pandemic. Their family members and anyone they work with. Because when you look at that remdesivir study that he talked about, which was not peer-reviewed and not published, and in fact, they changed the criterion in the middle of the study. They were first going to talk about deaths. He said it. You noted it, that it wasn't statistically significant. Then they changed it to, well, how long it took for the virus to be dissipated. Oh, stop it. I mean, and then on that same day, he came out with that, Sean, in a published, peer-reviewed, well-respected journal, probably the top journal in Europe, Lancet, came out with a study that showed that remdesivir was not effective.
Right. Well, listen to this. So my son played a soundbite for me from Dr. Rashid Buttar last night, and I should have had him send me that link because I'd play it for you now. Yeah. But Buttar was saying that the good news is, with credit to white hats, credit to President Trump, the U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams has announced that he is dropping the World Health Organization recommendations and their pandemic models in favor of real-time statistics, right? So let's move away from this Gates World Health Organization modeling. with all the inflated numbers, and let's move toward getting our society and our economy opened back up, because the numbers, the real numbers, the hard data isn't nearly as scary as the models. So with that said, I'm going to jump over here to Dr. Buttar, because I do have another soundbite queued up, and this is really important. I think this is rather horrifying. So I'm not sure how much of this will play. I'll just hit play here. But basically the takeaway is that Gates and Fauci are in bed together, bringing a nearly bankrupt pharmaceutical company back from the brink called Moderna, and they're partnering to create the first ever RNA vaccine, which will rewrite our DNA if we take it. So this is how deep in bed Fauci is with Gates. Listen to this.
Now, what most of you don't know is that there are about 80 vaccines that are coming to market. I think there's about 120 different vaccine manufacturers, and they're all vying to try to get this COVID-19 vaccine out there. And Bill Gates, by the way, is the largest vaccine manufacturer now, bar none. Okay, Bill Gates has his hands in all the different vaccine manufacturers, but is actually now bigger than any other vaccine manufacturer. It's number one is Bill Gates. I think actually number 1, 2, and 3 is Bill Gates. Now, there's a company called Moderna, and Moderna was about $1.5 billion in debt, and Moderna is a company that was about to go bankrupt. And Bill Gates was funding that company, and Dr. Fauci, along with Bill Gates, pulled that company out of bankruptcy, out of near bankruptcy. And Dr. Fauci has granted this company, I'm not sure exactly whether it's a contract or whether they've insinuated there'll be a contract or whether they've put them on the high-speed, low-drag track to get the contract. But regardless, Dr. Fauci has earmarked Moderna, this company, for the vaccine that will be that has the highest chance of coming to market. Now, the thing that I want to talk about Moderna and that Bobby shared with us is that
about Bobby
Moderna,
Kennedy.
one, has never brought a single product to market. Moderna has never brought a vaccine to market. And Moderna's vaccine is extremely, extremely disturbing what they're planning on doing. So I want you to understand this. This is a company that's never put a vaccine out, first. Second, they have never made any product that's been consumed by humans or utilized in humans. Third, they have bypassed all animal testing, all right? And what they're doing is they're coming up with the first of its kind vaccine that's called an RNA vaccine.
I'll pause it there because people should watch this entire video. This guy's great. Go to Dr. Rashid Buttar and just subscribe to his channel. How does that make you feel?
Well, here, Sean, here, another point. You showed that clip of Fauci in the Oval Office, all of a sudden talking about this anecdotal information, okay, as though it's already been peer-reviewed and published, what it is not, right? But the day before he did this stunt in the Oval Office, it was reported through Patrick Howley and a couple other investigative journalists that in 2014, Fauci, as director of his National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, approved $3.7 million for coronavirus research at that Wuhan testing lab where this thing came from, right? And in addition, he reallocated $3.7 million more in 2019. That came out the day before this, and then all of a sudden, Fauci shows up in the Oval Office spewing this anecdotal information when we have controlled studies through Dieter Renault on hydroxychloroquine and zithromycin along with zinc. I mean, this is crazy. And you mentioned many of these decisions made by these governors and these politicians and these unelected bureaucrats costing people's lives. We had another thing happen here in Michigan that nobody seems to want to talk about. Remember, the surge hit here on March 24th. Well, guess what? On the 24th, I was not only hearing about the surge from my friends who are on the front line, but I got another set of ominous calls from them. Said, Dave, we got huge troubles. The governor had their enforcement board send all of us letters saying that if we prescribed hydroxychloroquine and zithromycin or pharmacists dispensed it, that we would come under, quote, administrative action and our licenses suspended. Okay, there was one reporter with the Detroit News, Katie Postman, and me, my big mouth, shot our mouths off about it, went on social media, blew it all out. I spoke about it on my radio show, Operation Freedom, went nuts about it. And the 27th, Whitmer, totalitarian Whitmer, then, they clarified it, saying, well, we were concerned about hoarding. Well, wait a minute. If you read the 4-paragraph letters they sent out on the 24th, the first paragraph was about hoarding of physicians, hoarding it for themselves or families. But the second, third, and fourth was about prescribing it to other patients. There was no clinical benefit shown, when in fact, Dita Renault had all these studies out there. And so she reversed course on the 27th. On the 30th, she actually went to President Trump and went to the national stockpile to get hydroxychloroquine. Well, here's the interesting point, another interesting point. A representative from the poorest part of Detroit in Dearborn, remember, where this hub started, where Corona Gretchen had been campaigning for Biden in early March, the initial hotspot in our state, Karen Whitsett, who was a Democratic rep from the poorest part of Detroit, part of Dearborn, she contracted coronavirus. She asked to get hydroxychloroquine, and she knew about asking because she had heard President Trump asking about it. Initially, her first physician said he couldn't give it to her because of what Whitmer had in place. She kept going downhill. She had an underlying history of Lyme disease, which made her vulnerable. Remember, folks that have underlying medical conditions, cardiovascular, pulmonary, diabetes, obesity, and the like, bone marrow issues, all have a higher incidence of contracting coronavirus. Well, she was going down the tubes. She could barely breathe. And then this was lifted, this restriction, and Whitmer went to the stockpile. A second physician ended up getting her hydroxychloroquine. So people say, well, it doesn't work. Here's what Karen Whitsett said. I could hardly breathe. I was in my way. I was going to the hospital because I knew I was heading for a ventilator. My doctor got me the hydroxychloroquine within 2 hours. I was miraculously doing better.
No.
She said by the next day I could do chores. Okay. She had the audacity, Sean, to publicly thank President Trump. President Trump brought her to the White House about 2 weeks ago, along with some other survivors of coronavirus. And she told her the story. They had a fantastic interaction. I ended up interviewing her on my platform, my YouTube channel, Operation Freedom. I did it on the subscription side, moved it to the free side. People can go to Operation Freedom YouTube. I believe actually it's the best interview I've ever done. But she not only showed her heart, but she showed the heart of what the president is like behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. And it upset totalitarian Whitmer. It upset the Democratic Party. 3 hours after my interview with her came out, the Democrat Party, the globalist party, the totalitarian party, whatever you want to call them, they censured her for going to the White House, speaking to the president, portraying him in a positive light, and speaking about hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax that saved her life. They have since censured her.
It's actually pretty stunning, isn't it? Because, had she praised Remdesivir and Fauci and Gates, she'd be propped up by the mainstream media and celebrated by the Democrats. The folks that adhere to Q, I think, have it right to some extent in that they're saying the president is allowing these people to show the world how evil they are. I mean, I do think there's some truth in that because Bill Gates, look, he's guilty of crimes against humanity for the polio vaccine, which gave tens of thousands of kids polio. And these are the same people that we're supposed to shelter in place for 18 months and keep our businesses shut down and go bankrupt as we await their vaccine? And Fauci and Gates are in bed together and they want their first ever RNA vaccine to be rolled out, which evidently would rewrite DNA of human beings and is very, very dangerous. So these people are evil and they are exposing themselves as evil. And I should just play this clip. This is what a real patriot looks like. I don't know if you've seen this clip, Dave. I wonder if this guy isn't from Michigan, but let's just listen to part of this.
The same oath I took when I put my hand on God's word and held my other hand up to him and swore that I'd give my life to defend that Constitution. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but regardless of what y'all do or don't do, I'm not going to enforce an unconstitutional law. I'm going to
Well,
I'm going to protect the people of this county regardless of what's done here. So I'm just praying. I've been praying about this thing all week, that God would touch y'all's heart and say, hey, let's get on board. Let's do the right thing. Let's let these people know that we're here to support them, and we're not going to allocate any personnel, finances, resources, or facilities to infringe on their liberties. Thank you.
Sean, there were 4 very courageous sheriffs in the state of Michigan that took Whitmer on. And they said, no, we're not enforcing these totalitarian edicts through executive order by this governor. Now, since there have been, let me tell you something. People say, well, these protests, they don't lead that much. Oh, let me tell you something. It's caused a firestorm. Let me tell you something. The legislature in Michigan, the Republic is Republican, House and Senate. The leadership had done nothing until these protests started, and they saw, wait a minute, if we don't start doing something. So last week, when Whitmer went to try to extend this thing, the House and the Senate said, sorry, ain't going to happen. In addition, there have been some legislators that have filed suit against Whitmer because of now an executive order after the House voted that they weren't going to go along with her extending the measures. She came in 11 o'clock at night last Thursday night through executive order and extended it. Now we have legislators suing her. We have 5 businesses suing her. We have 4 sheriffs, and there should be sheriffs from every county doing this, but 4 courageous sheriffs in Michigan standing up to her. And there were some other individuals that as citizens sued her. Now listen to this, Sean, and this is something that just will drive you insane. That these other cases are pending, but the citizen case against Whitmer and the government of the state of Michigan went in front of a judge last week, a Michigan Court of Claims judge, Christopher Murray. Okay, ready for this? He ended up siding with Whitmer. Imagine that. Like a good totalitarian tool that he is. But listen to this. This is what he said. Sit down. Quote, constitutional rights are subject to reasonable regulation by the state.
No, they're not.
Oh,
no,
my goodness. This guy is a judge who obviously is not familiar with the the Constitution of the state of Michigan, with the United States Constitution, with the Bill of Rights. This is what but I have to give the public credit. They are peacefully protesting recurrently. They are not taking this. They are filing lawsuits. We have sheriffs standing up. And we now have some of these legislators that needed to grow a part of their anatomy that finally did grow a part of their anatomy and are taking on this totalitarian thug in Michigan.
So how does this end, my friend? I mean, I was banned from Twitter for 12 hours. I was put in Twitter jail for daring to share a lawsuit coming out of Florida in which a man was arrested for opening up his business, and the local DA stood down knowing that he couldn't prosecute because he has no legal authority to force businesses to be shut down. On the back of that, I suggested, America, it's time to open up for business again. Open up your bars, open up your restaurants, open up your hair salons, your barbershops, your bowling alleys, and let's get back to work, because they can't stand against us all if we stand together. And I don't know. It just leaves me speechless, man, because look, Representative Andy Biggs has it right. Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx have basically said, we would rather commit economic suicide than have freedom and let people govern themselves and take the risk of freedom. It's past time for them to exit the stage. I couldn't agree more. So how does all of this end?
Here's how I think it ends. And there was an article recently written by Caitlin Johnson from Medium.com, and here's the headline. They are rolling out the architecture of oppression now because they fear the people. And at the very end of it, she quotes a journalist, Jonathan Cook, who said it best when he wrote, quote, our leaders are terrified, not of the virus, but of us. You see, one of the things that the unintended consequences that occurred to the deep state with the rollout of this virus is I believe this was a bit of a beta test. I believe this was to see how far they could push the public, what they could get away with as far as stripping people of their freedoms and liberties. And they realized there is a very hard stop to this, that people started to push back, I think even sooner than they anticipated. So where we stand is people need to peacefully protest. They need to say, okay, if you're going to keep inflicting this economic hardship on us, and you keep saying you're doing it based on science and data, show us the science and data. Quit giving us this rhetoric. And if you cannot show us science and data, guess what? Oh, these phases, 1, 2, and 3 that the president had put out, okay, we're rolling through these phases a lot quicker than some of these, quote, experts, end quote, are saying we should. I mean, look at Ezekiel Emanuel was out there not too long, a couple weeks ago. I mean, this is Dr. Death, right? This is the guy who wrote an article in the Lancet Journal years ago called with the complete lives curve. We call it the Grim Reaper curves, where essentially he says only people between the ages of 15 and 40 should get treated because, well, they're the most valuable members of society. And this guy's out there again, Dr. Death, saying, oh yeah, we're going to have to shut everything down for 18 months. No, this guy's a globalist hack. Always has been, always will be. And those are the type of people no one should listen to. Look, we want to keep people safe, right? Sean, I've dedicated my entire life to prevention, right? In addition to being an orthopedic surgeon, my work in prevention is is really led a lot of positive impact in other people's lives. According to the government, one of the studies I was the chief investigator for led to the prevention of 1.7 million people, prevented them from being injured every year, saved $2 billion in healthcare costs every year. If there's anybody that wants to talk about prevention and wellness, it's me. On the other hand, you have to put everything in front of you. And as you mentioned, when you when you shut down an economy, how shutting down an economy, does that lead to less poverty, less destitution, less hunger? No, more of all the same. But when we have an illness like this, and at first you could see some of these sweeping changes that needed until we got our hands on the real data, on what was really happening. Look, does this affect primarily older people? Yes. Does this primarily affect folks that are debilitated or have underlying medical conditions? Yes. Does it also affect some people that are young? Yes. Not that often, but it does. Can it be devastating in that age group? Yes, it can to certain people. On the other hand, if you look at these numbers, Sean, and you touched on it earlier, you know, I looked at some data. Johns Hopkins, everybody quotes Johns Hopkins. As of May 1st, they had the total number of deaths related to coronavirus at over 65,000 Americans. Okay, as of May 1st, I went deep into the CDC files. Probably were in areas I wasn't supposed to go, but I went there, right? And if you go to the National Vital Statistics System, and in particular the National Center for Health Statistics, they have a section that is just based on not saying, you know, dying with something is different than dying from something, okay? I mean, it's standard nomenclature in medicine, right? So if I break my leg, okay, and I then go to the hospital and I develop a blood clot that travels to my lungs and shuts my lungs and heart down and I die. I died from a pulmonary embolus, right? I died with a broken leg, but I died from the pulmonary embolus. The problem is when you look at some of this stuff from Johns Hopkins and all these other places, if anybody is even diagnosed with coronavirus or potentially having coronavirus, that's the cause of death. Well, let me tell you something. When you look at this inside data from the CDC, the National Vital Statistics System, they just look at death certificates, okay, that have been gone through, okay, and analyzed. So on the same day, May 1st, 2020, when over 65,000 Americans had died and the mainstream media, lamestream fake media was out there like, oh, there are already over 60,000 deaths. Well, actually, if you look at just death certificates, 37,000 Americans died, according to the CDC's own internal numbers. Not 65,000. I mean, slightly, almost half of what was being reported through Johns Hopkins and through the media and the like. And you know, we know from the beginning, Sean, the models, that Imperial College model was bull. It was bull. It was fear-mongering. And then this University of Washington data, there's a lot of bull there too. Because when you start looking at the real data, it's drastically different. And that is where I have a problem with Fauci and some of these other people. They needed to start to look at the real data a month ago. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's get a month or two on board and let's see where the real data is. And then you can start saying, okay, look, this illness is not affecting certain age groups. It's not affecting certain parts of our country. So rather than lock down the whole country because, well, whatever happens in New York, it's going to happen everywhere else, not necessarily the case. Mm-hmm. And Dina Renaud, the best clinical researcher in the world in infectious disease, tells us that.
It just seems like a full court press right now, doesn't it? I mean, I think you're right. It was sort of a litmus test to see how far could they push? How much freedom could they take from human beings across the planet before people stood up in droves against these tyrants? And it feels like it's their final assault, really. It feels like they're going all in. They played their pandemic card because we were winning. So they played their pandemic card, held the president and the economy over a barrel. I really feel like it's a full court press because of what we're seeing in Canada. You know, the hand of the Queen, the puppet that pledged his fealty and secrecy and his honor and oath to the Queen of England, just banned assault weapons out of the blue. So it just seems like such a full court press. It seems like they're going for broke right now.
They are. And I think it goes back to that article from Caitlin Johnson. Their leaders are terrified not of the virus, but of us. Mm-hmm. You see, they're terrified that a second Trump term, they have already played all their cards, right? The Russian hoax didn't work. The Ukrainian hoax didn't work. The impeachment hoax didn't work. The you name whatever hoax didn't work, right? They've played their hand. So now they're going to push, not that the virus is a hoax, but they're going to try to clamp down as hard as they can, crush the economy, because they know if the economy is crushed, the chances of President Trump getting a second term are less. Well, guess what? It's kind of backfiring now. It really is backfiring on them. And one other point, when folks see Fauci and Birx that are tied with the Gates Foundation and Big Pharma and Big Vaccine, and I've said this since January, Sean, and I've taken a lot of heat for it. When you see those folks on the stage with President Trump, many people say, well, look at how Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, look at how they're influencing President Trump. They're in his head and they're manipulating him. Really? Anyone I know who has ever dealt with Donald Trump on any kind of personal basis has never walked away and said to me, boy, we really fooled him. Oh, we really manipulated him. You know what? When I see those two on stage with him, here's what I think. There's Donald Trump, and he has two hostages up there with him that have ties to the deep state. And he has them up there with him. People need to look at this differently. I don't believe that Fauci and Birx are having a deleterious effect on President Trump. I think he knows everything about them. I think he knows who their ties are. But imagine if he fired them, imagine the optics of that. It's much better if he keeps them around him and he dissembles the World Health Organization and he dissembles the Gates Foundation and he dissembles the NIH so that it is more responsive to people and their needs as opposed to responsive to the deep state that is integrated in the Gates Foundation, the NIH, and the World Health Organization.
Yep. No, I can see that viewpoint, and I think that what we need to see is indictments of the deep state criminals. I just put a poll out on my Patreon page last night, in fact, asking people and listing the names of about 7 or 8 different deep state criminals. Of these criminals, which one, if you could only pick one, which one would you arrest? And I thought Hillary Clinton might be the winner, but the overwhelming winner was George Soros.
Now, my overwhelming winner is John Brennan.
Yeah, he was on my list.
Yeah.
See if I can find that.
He is true. They're all evil. Don't get me wrong. And you know what? Any of the above would be a fine selection.
Oh, I'm wrong. It's a tie. Hold on here. Let me show you.
Who's it between?
So I wrote, if you could pick one, dear Patreon friends, I pray for mass arrests of high-level deep state traitors like the ones mentioned in this poll. But if you had the power to arrest one and only one of these traitors, who would it be? George Soros and Hillary Clinton are tied at around 30%, with Hillary up by 1%. So I think people know who the real criminals are. I think people want to see Hillary Clinton arrested because she is an American politician. She wants to be in the Oval Office. We all know the power that George Soros has, but he's getting up in age. By the time he croaks, he's just going to hand the whole thing off to his evil son. Mm-hmm. The arrest of Hillary Clinton would send a really great message to the country, I think. People would love to see Hillary. And John Brennan only registered 2%.
I'm surprised because if you look at what Brennan has been behind, the illegal surveillance, the co-opting of the intelligence agencies across the board, his single-handed involvement in the stripping of freedoms and liberties of every American is off the charts. And I truly believe that by taking Brennan down, he's not the head of the snake. Okay, and frankly, all these people here are outstanding candidates to be brought down, but none of them are the head of the snake. Okay, none of them are the head of the snake. But I believe by taking down their evildoer in the intelligence agencies, which is Brennan, and you can throw Clapper in there too, but Brennan is I think a higher priority target. Mm-hmm. You take him down and you watch how many people start squealing. I mean squealing.
Who do you think is the head of the snake? It's not one person. We know.
No, it's not one person.
It's the Bilderberg Group. It's the Club of Rome.
Yeah, it's the large international banking families.
Yeah.
Right? So you can put the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Lazards, the Pinkuses, the Warburgs. And as I understand it, what I've been told by several people is kind of the family that kind of runs the show of the international banking family is the Pesur family.
Yeah. Yeah, Neon Revolt did a really nice piece about the Pesur family, which I had never even heard of. Evidently they have more power than the Rothschilds. I'm not sure if that's true, but...
Well, they do. I believe that's correct because their fingers are in every pie, not just some pies, not just a lot of pies, but all the pies. But here's the thing. They kind of put the Rothschilds and Rockefellers out there to kind of take the arrows. And that's why I believe they're the head of the snake, because here's a guy like you, Sean, and saying, I really haven't heard of them. Whoa, that means they're doing something right.
Yeah, no, that's right. That was, I think, about a year ago, Neon Revolt wrote that article about the Pesurs. Well, all right, my friend. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We know that the head of the snake is a group of international criminal bankers, maybe headed by the Rothschilds and the Pesurs, but a lot of their foot soldiers are the people on this list. Yeah. I probably should have put Gretchen Whitmer on this list, too. She wouldn't have registered that many votes, but she's definitely a tyrant. And these tyrants need to be toppled, man. She needs to be recalled or impeached. I mean...
Well, there's work going on recalling her. There's work on impeaching her, and frankly, there are very few people in the state of Michigan now that are in her corner. And she is. I believe that her term as governor will be very short in the not foreseeable future, because she just you cannot strip people of their freedoms and liberties as she has in such a universal fashion and expect not to be impeached or recalled. It's just a point of fact. She's pushed the envelope too far, and she, I believe, will be removed.
All righty. Well, I hope so. And in the meantime, do you want to remind people how they can find you?
Sure. Our radio show airs live out of the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, which is another thing. I can't go to my freedom bunker at the radio station because of Whitmer. You have to have papers to show you're an essential employee, so I actually have to do it from an ancillary bunker. But the show airs live every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern. Great guests, great analysis. In addition, I have my YouTube channel, also called Operation Freedom. People should go there to look at that Karen Whitsett article, interview. She's outstanding, and you'll get a real fine appreciation for not only her, but the president. And then I'm also available at davejanda.com, davejanda.com. We have the free, the public side. We also have the subscription side, 30 cents a day, extra shows, extra content, all the archives, all the podcasts. And Sean, I would truly like to thank you for everything you do. You take tremendous heat, and you're a much cooler guy than I am. You really are. You handle the heat, and you just keep moving along, and you keep battling the deep state on a daily basis. Our country and our world, for that matter, are better for your efforts, and I thank you for having the persistence and the perseverance of doing it 24/7 on behalf of every person of our country and the world.
No, 100% back at you. That's very kind, and I'm very humbled, and I thank you for those kind words, and back at you 100%. And we can all inspire each other. I mean, that sheriff standing up in, I don't even know what state that was. Maybe that was Michigan, but saying that he would not enforce unconstitutional executive orders or laws is just wonderful. I mean, imagine how quickly we could take our nation back if all of the cops and all of the sheriffs were wired like he is. Guys, our guest has been the one, the only Dr. Dave Janda, Operation Freedom. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Sean, and thanks for everything you do.
All right. Thank you too, my friend. And guys, thanks so much for tuning in. For real news 24/7, please do visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. And check us out at thephaser.com too, where I hand select video that you may otherwise miss. All right, guys. God bless. Bye-bye.
For the people who are born here, who have Irishness, have the blood of Ireland in their veins, and the thoughts of Irish culture in their heads and in their hearts, shut up is the answer to those people. Shut up. We have taken over your country. So we are, in effect, for all the purposes, intents and purposes, we are actually recolonized now.